From brokenness to breakthrough, this is Failure into Freedom. I'm Katie Holt Lehrman, a mom, wife, entrepreneur, and survivor, here to share my story of walking away from domestic violence, finding healing through faith, and learning to live free. Each week, we'll talk about resilience, hope, and the truth that no matter your past, you are never too far gone for freedom. This is real, this is raw, this is Failure into Freedom. Let's dive in.
Hey guys, welcome back to Failure into Freedom. I'm Katie, and if you were listening last week, we went through the final break point, the point where there was no recovering. There was no recovering the fumble, okay? So yeah, it's pretty exhausting thinking back, mentally exhausting thinking back and going through everything that I had to go through, because this kind of starts the period of my life right now that I remember, but I don't remember the fine details. And I believe that everything is in the details because God is in the details. And when I share this, clearly He's getting the glory of it. So I want to make sure that I share the details of it. So it's been pretty emotionally and mentally exhausting, having to go back through some stuff. But I know that my discomfort right now, one, is healing, and two, it's helping others. Which kind of brings me to this next kind of part in my story. And it kind of reminds me of the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years. And it wasn't because God had forgotten them, but He was preparing them. My desert didn't last 40 years, excuse me. This little time period that I'm responding and calling it the desert, even though the desert probably went on longer than that, I'm saying mine was 45 days. 45 days of chaos, exhaustion, and revelation. 45 days that changed everything. Before we get started, I want to offer a gentle warning. This episode talks about domestic violence, emotional abuse, and trauma recovery. Please take care of your heart while you listen. If you need to pause or step away, do that, because your peace matters the most. Deuteronomy 8:2. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way into the wilderness these 40 years to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart. Even when I felt completely lost, He was leading me. The desert begins. When the emergency protective order was issued, it was 45 days. I had no idea that those weeks would feel like wandering through a desert. He was gone. The house was in shambles. CPS showed up with an ultimatum. CPS showed up with an ultimatum. If you choose him, you lose your kids. That was it for me. I was done. Within hours of me making the phone call to my family to let them know what transpired, my grandparents were there and my mom showed up soon after. They helped me clean every inch of that house. We shampooed the carpet, scrubbed the walls. They helped me hang up stuff. My grandmother, God rest her soul, I miss her so much. She went through his man cave. She went through all of his stuff, so I didn't even have to look or touch it. And she boxed it up and put it in a storage unit that we had in the backyard. We found drugs, syringes. We had to call the cops to dispose of it properly and to have it on record if we needed to use it in any court cases. I was pregnant, I was exhausted, I was sick, and I was just trying to hold it all together. Well, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. The desert voices. He called nonstop. Letters started coming in from the jail, manipulative and sickening things. If I didn't answer his phone call, he'd find another way to reach me. One day, he called his parents, screaming for more money. He said that he didn't have a toothbrush or toilet paper or bars of soap, which they had just loaded his account with money not even a week prior. And so they told him, no, we already gave you enough money. Why didn't you buy that stuff? And then he called me, saying the same stuff and that he wanted me to send him coloring sheets because he wanted coloring sheets to color while he was sitting in county jail. I told him no. I didn't have time for that. He called me every name in the book you can think of. I finally just hung up and was sobbing, feeling like I had just failed again. Minutes later, his parents called, and they were graceful and they were kind. They said they couldn't believe what he had put me through, and I realized for the first time, maybe they were finally starting to see. Mountains in the desert. A few days later, I was sitting at the mule barn, the little boot house that I managed with my boss, Nancy. She made me some of this like spicy kind of like pasta soup. It was so good. And she brought it because she knew I wasn't eating. We were sitting there in the boot room and he called again. Nancy told me to answer it and put it on speakerphone. So I did. He started talking about possibly getting released because they were done with him in Brazos County, but Anson/Jones County had violated his probation and they sent out a bench warrant and they had 10 days to go pick him up. He told me that in that 10 days, if they didn't come and pick him up, that they would just release him. And he was trying to convince me to let him come home, break the 45-day protective order, let him come home, and that he would turn himself in with me and the baby. And I remember Nancy's eyes getting huge. She grabbed my phone, muted the call. She grabbed my phone, muted the call, and said, "Oh, hell no. Tell him no. Stand your ground. If he gets out, he'll try to kill you and those babies." That was my Red Sea moment. Then that was the first time I realized God wasn't bringing me this far to send me back into bondage. God's provision. After that, and after getting some coaching from Nancy, who had a criminal justice background, and she was walking me through the process of all of this, plus on top of connecting all of his court cases, I finally decided that I was going to file an extension of the protective order. So instead of it just being an emergency 45-day temporary protective order, I was going in for the 3-year one. I walked into Bryan PD with my baby and a little umbrella stroller. I was pregnant and sick as can be, with a binder full of evidence. Letters, call logs, case numbers from every county he had charges in, even ones I dug up in different states. After I submitted my little hand letter asking for them to consider the 3-year protective order, I went back home to get ready for work. And within 30 minutes, I think, of me leaving the police department, I got a call from a bailiff asking me to come meet with the judge who issued my emergency protective order. I said, yeah, let me rearrange a couple of things. Let me see if I can get my shift switched, and then I will be in. And I called, I think it was Blake. Blake was working that day. Miss Blake Mosley. I called her, asked her if she could open, and then I would come in around lunchtime to be with her. We just switched shifts, and she said, yeah, so she handled it. And so I showed up at the courthouse, and when I got there, I was stunned. It was the judge, the ADA, the DA, the women's shelter advocate, and the police. They were all there. They had toys already set out and a seat waiting for me. The judge looked me in the eyes and said, "I have been praying you would come back to my court. The last man who stood in front of me and cussed me the way your husband did got out and killed his wife, children, and mother-in-law. I wasn't going to let that happen again." That hit me like a freaking lightning bolt. God had been moving behind the scenes the whole time, aligning people to protect me and my children, even when I thought I was alone. They laid out every step for me: how to keep records, how to report violations, how to stay safe. They made sure my new order was going before another judge before my prior one expired. God was closing the gap even in the wilderness. I'll never forget the day that I had court. Um, it was crazy because it was all within that 10-day period of my ex-husband possibly being bench warranted to Jones County. So he got notice that I was asking for an extension of the protective order, and he didn't request to go to court, I guess. I don't know. Maybe he thought that they were going to automatically get him. I don't know what happened. But I'm sitting there thinking that I'm going to have to testify, and the domestic violence coordinator or attorney that works for the county there was preparing me like, hey, if he does get pulled from the jail, both of you are going to testify against each other, and then the judge will just determine that. And I'm like, great. I haven't seen this man since knight in shining armor freaking popped his head into our door. Anywho, so we show up. My mom comes with me. We show up, and he is nowhere to be found. He's not there. And I start, every morning I would always check, which it took me going on 3 years now to not have to check to see where he's at for other reasons that we'll talk about later. But like 3 years. I just now get comfortable of like not pulling up my phone and going to the court records or going to TDCJ or going anywhere to figure out where he's at. So anywho, I looked that morning and it said he was still in custody, but he wasn't there. And I was like, well, this is weird, but okay. Thank you, Lord, for the favor. And then, the judge defaulted in my favor because he wasn't there. So the 3-year protective order got extended, like it got established, and it covered me, it covered my son, it covered the unborn baby I was carrying, it covered us anywhere we moved. I just had to get it, the address updated, my place of business. It included if the kids went to daycare, it included our church, it included everything. It was amazing. But I was so shocked that he wasn't there. Come to find out, he got transferred that day, and he didn't request to stay for his court date there. He just thought that he was going to get pulled, and that was it. Like, he didn't have to do anything, and he was letting whoever just handle it for him, because that's typically what he did anyways. So, again, another God moment closing the gap, even when I had no idea what he was doing behind the scenes. After the order came through, his mom came to visit us. She stayed with me and our son for a week. My mom came too, just to make sure we were safe, especially because my ex-husband would threaten that his family had money, and if they wanted to make my son disappear and where I would never see him again, they could do it in a heartbeat. So I don't think that my ex-mother-in-law would do that, but like anytime this man said something, it happened when it was bad. So we were just careful. It was awkward, it was heavy, and it was painful. She was still trying to believe her son could change while I was just trying to breathe. I scheduled an ultrasound. It was a gender reveal appointment. We found out I was having a baby girl. And at that moment, even in the chaos, it was holy. A heartbeat still in the desert. My sticker burr. When his mom told him the news and told him what I wanted to name the baby, because I couldn't talk to him and he couldn't talk to me. I don't think I went into that about the protective order. So every time he would like call me or write me letters or anything like that, those were all violations of protective orders. So I finally, after it got extended, I think I called his mom and was like, yo, he needs to stop calling me, because every time he called me and left a voicemail, and every time he sent me a letter or a card or anything in the mail, I had to go up. I felt like I lived at the Bryan Police Department. I had to go up and individually file a police report, give them a copy, email them or message them the damn voicemail. Like, it was so exhausting. And finally, after he did it, like probably 25, 30 times, I called his mom, and I had told him to stop. Like, you're incriminating yourself. And he's like, no, you're not going to do this. You're not going to do this. And I did it every single time. And finally, I told his mom, like, He has a felony charge, another felony charge pending because he refuses to stop calling me or sending me letters. Please tell him to stop. If he wants to tell me something, he can call you and you can tell me. That's what he can do. But he cannot contact me anymore. He has more charges because of it, because he's not respecting the boundary. Sorry, I forgot to tell you all that. Anyways, so while she's being the third party communication person between us, and I tell her what I want to name the baby, and she tells him, hey, it's a girl, like clearly, because we have to wait for him to call us from the jail/prison, wherever he was. She told him the name, and he twisted it in something nasty and ugly. He said that I was naming the baby after an old boyfriend. And I remember looking at her because she popped out of her room in our house, and I was sitting on the couch, and she said, hey, he said something about the name that y'all wanted to name the first baby if it was a girl, which was actually named after her and her mother, his grandmother. And I said, no, we're going to go with this name now, because that was his name if he was a girl. So we're doing a different name. And she goes, well, he said it was from an old boyfriend. And I remember just popping off and being like, tell him if he wanted to name this baby or be a part, he shouldn't have gotten himself locked up. And I remember her going, because they don't do confrontation. She just kind of, you could see that her butthole puckered, and she went back into the room to talk to him. And that was the first time I truly stood up to him through his mother, I guess. And it was the first time I kind of felt if you knew me before him and you know me now, you know that I am a spitfire. And if it ain't right, I'm going to say it. And that was the first time I finally felt like my power was coming back. There was another instance before we get off here that I talk about I was gaining my power back, but there's another moment where I just didn't know my footing. So I was taking my ex-mother-in-law back to Austin because she was flying out of Austin to go back to, rewind. So we had a conversation after her telling him that about the name and everything else. And I sat her down and with my mother present, and I just told her, like, hey, I don't know what the future holds for me and your son. I have no idea. I have to do what's going to protect me mentally, emotionally, physically for the baby right here at my feet and the baby I'm carrying. I promise that I will never say anything negative directly to these children. I won't talk about him, because they are part of him, and that's going to hurt them whenever they realize it. I'm never going to do that. And I have still kept good on that promise. My 2 children, Earthside, to this day, don't know anything about him. You know who their daddy is? My current husband, because he's been there since Neil was 2.5 years old and Dawson was barely a year old. That's their daddy. And people also tell me, like, side note, like, oh my gosh, they look so much like my husband. And I'm like, yes, they do. I will own it. Like, love breeds biology. I swear by it. Anyways, rewind. So we sit down and I tell her these things. I'm never going to talk negatively about him to these children. And I say, these will forever be your grandchildren, and I will never take them away from you. Never. Because these are her only biological grandchildren at the time. And I wasn't going to do that. I didn't have a problem with them at that point. They were trying their best, and I was trying my best. He was a grown-ass man that needed to take responsibility for what he had put not only me through, but his family through. Also, another conversation that always sticks out that I had with my ex-mother-in-law is like a couple days later. Rewind. So after I say that bit, she looks at my mom and says to my mom, I don't know how you didn't kill him, because if it was my daughter, I would have killed him. I would have put a bullet in his head. She verbatim said that. She knew that this was not okay. And my mother responds back to her of, you see these 4-inch lag bolt D-rings into the frame of the house and the steel rod that goes across the doors? He wasn't going to barge down those doors again. Because remember when my parents or my mom came in and my grandparents came in and they completely redid everything, I forgot to mention, she locked my ass down where no one was coming in when I was in that building or in that house. So then the next couple of days, I took her back to Austin because that's where she was flying out of. And she asked me, because I told her, I'm an open book. If you want to ask me whatever you would like to ask me, if I'm not comfortable with it, I'll just let you know. But just ask me whatever you want. It's the only way we're going to heal from this. And she asked me, I do have a question. I said, yeah, what is it? And she goes, was this baby you're carrying made out of love? And I just remember kind of like freezing, and then I went into fakeness. I just was like, yeah, of course, I love your son so much. I cannot appreciate, I can't deal with the decisions he constantly makes to put me and the kids in jeopardy. I just can't tolerate that. And I remember the night that the baby was made, and unfortunately, um, it was not made out of love. It was made out of being forced and being told if I didn't, then other things would happen. So I, in his words, submitted and did my wifely duties. So yeah. So right when I thought I was getting my power back, I realized, whoop, I can't be too honest yet. And it's okay. It was give or take. And it was me learning to be graceful with myself. Looking back at those 45 days, and that was right around the 45 days, right before technically the emergency protective order would have ended. I was exhausted, sick, scared, and just spiritually dry. But God was there in every detail. In Nancy's soup, in the judge's urgency, and my mom's steel bolts on the door, and in the ultrasound showing new life. He didn't part the sea all at once, but he gave me little streams in the desert. Sometimes the desert isn't punishment, it's preparation. God wasn't punishing me, he was preparing me to walk in freedom. When I finally stopped running in circles, when I finally stopped trying to fix, explain, or please, I realized the desert wasn't empty. It was holy ground. If you're wandering in your own desert right now, I just want to remind you, God hasn't forgotten you. He is refining you. And freedom is coming. All right, let's go into our journal responses. You know me, love it. So here's some questions for you to think about and journal. Number 1, what did the first few days after everything happened feel like? Describe it using imaginary sounds, sensations, and emotions. 2, how did the isolation and emptiness show up during that season? For me, it showed up as clearly being isolated and away from my person that was supposed to protect and provide for us. 3, when everything was taken away, what was left that you had still? What was left of you physically? What was left of you emotionally? And what was left of you spiritually? What coping mechanisms helped you make it through each day? Which ones hurt you in the long run? What part of your old life did you have to mourn? And then what people or patterns did you have to release in order to protect your peace? All right, guys. Thank you so much with hanging out. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Believe it or not, this is nowhere near the end of my story because it takes off again in a crazy, dramatic way. It's foreshadowing of what the child that I was carrying, how she was going to be. She's my sticker burr, but man, oh man, is she dramatic. So, this has been Failure into Freedom. I'm Katie, and I'm learning that even in the desert, God's grace still flows and will continue to flow no matter what. See y'all next time.